Chapter 7. The Mad Priest. The mad priest was rather short. His hair was white from suffering, but his beard, which reached down to his chest, was still black. Yet he was probably 65 years old. His eyes burned, not with madness, as the jailers said, but with intelligence. At once Edmund poured out the story of his imprisonment. Then it was Father Faria's turn. The priest had been at the Chateau d'If 16 years, 4 years longer than Edmund. He was Italian, a man of the church, and learned. Political enemies had caused his arrest, after the death of the rich Cardinal Spada, who had protected Faria and treated him like a son. As he listened, Edmund felt that his whole world had turned over, now that he had a friend. He dared to say friend, even though Faria was so much older and so much better educated than he. Edmund would never have dared consider such a man his friend back in Marseille. On his side, Faria was warmed by Edmund's youth and admiration for him. For the next few weeks, the two men used the passageway freely to go between Edmund's dungeon and the priest's cell. This cell was a larger and fitter place to live than the dungeon, since Faria was not considered dangerous, only mad, by his jailers. Edmund was in a constant state of amazement at the priest's accomplishments. Faria had made a rope ladder, using the threads unraveled from his blanket. The sharp bone of a fish had been fashioned into a needle. Cartilage or tissue fibers from other fish were made into pens, and an unused fireplace provided soot for ink. With such writing tools, Faria had covered all of his shirts and handkerchiefs with his political ideas on the government in Italy. Sometimes he even used his own blood to write with. Finally, he showed Edmund his main accomplishment, a razor-sharp knife made from a candlestick. As all these treasures were laid before Edmund, he began to weep at his own inferiority. Not only was he ignorant of everything written on Faria's cloth, but also he had wasted his prison years in idleness. At Edmund's confession, Faria's eyes shone, for he loved to teach. At once he formed a plan for Edmund's education. He himself knew 4 languages, and had read widely in all of them. He was determined to pass them and all that he knew of mathematics, physics, and history on to Edmund. During the next year and a half, Faria taught, and Edmund made rapid progress. He was delighted to find within himself a love of learning, and he worked hard at his studies. Another change occurred in him. Without realizing it, he began to adopt Faria's refined, quiet way of speaking and moving. Soon the rough sailor vanished, and an educated young gentleman emerged. With his newly found powers of thinking, Edmund also plotted their escape. They would tunnel into the corridor in front of Faria's cell. In the middle of the night, they would burst out of the tunnel and overpower the 2 guards who always sat half asleep at a table. Dressed in the guards' uniforms and using their keys, they would make their way out of the prison. Then they would jump into the sea and swim to safety. The 2 friends shook hands on it.